The sun had not yet risen over the barren Afghan valley, but the air already shimmered with heat and danger. The mountains surrounding the Helmand corridor were still wrapped in a violet haze, and in the command tent at Forward Operating Base Rhino, the Navy SEAL team sat in uneasy silence. A rescue mission had come down from Joint Command 1 that most operators had quietly refused. An American informant had been captured by a Taliban cell, dragged into the valley where the enemy's snipers ruled the ridges. No satellite drone could see clearly through the storm-stirred dust, and every approach route was lined with IEDs. The orders were simple: retrieve the asset or confirm the kill. Simple, except nothing in that valley was simple. The last patrol that ventured there never came back. Lieutenant Commander Hall, the team leader, studied the topographical map under the dull light of a single lamp. His face was carved by years of sand and strain. "We move at first light," he said quietly. No one answered. Each man knew what that meant. If they went in, there was no promise of coming out. Then the tent flap opened. A figure stepped in, lean, tall, moving with a calm so unnatural it drew every gaze. The newcomer carried a long black rifle case and wore the Navy's desert camouflage, sleeves rolled neatly to the elbows. A captain's insignia glinted faintly on the chest plate. Halle frowned. "You're late." "Not really," the newcomer replied. The voice was soft, almost musical, unmistakably female. She placed the rifle case on the table, unzipped it with practiced precision, and revealed the monstrous silhouette of a Barrett M82 A150 caliber. Matte black, modified with a carbon suppressor and an old-school analog scope. Chief Petty Officer Daniels, the teen's heavy gunner, blinked. "We're getting babysat by a tourist?" he muttered. The woman ignored him, checked the bolt, wiped a spot of invisible dust from the barrel, and said simply, "I'm your Overwatch." Halle raised a brow. "Name?" "Lieutenant Sarah Miles, Joint Special Operations Command, attached for one mission." Daniels snorted. Didn't know JSOC was hiring Olympians. Sarah's blue eyes lifted, steady and unflinching. "You prefer to walk in blind?" The tent fell silent. Halle leaned forward. "I've heard that name before. Miles, you worked Kandahar Ridge?" She gave the faintest nod. "That was the op where the Ranger convoy got ambushed," Halle continued. "Some unknown sniper cleared the ridge before air support arrived." Sarah locked the rifle back into its case. "Unknown's good. Keeps the enemy guessing." The tension shifted just a little. She wasn't boasting. She was stating fact. Halle studied her for another long moment, then turned to his team. "Gear up. We roll at 0500. Lieutenant Miles will take high ground north of the valley. We move on her signal." When the meeting broke, Daniels whispered to the medic, "Great, a legend with lipstick." But an hour later, when the team stepped out into the pre-dawn chill, they saw her already there kneeling beside the Humvee. Adjusting her scope, eyes narrowed toward the horizon. No hesitation, no chatter. The kind of stillness that made even veterans feel the weight of silence. The convoy crawled through the desert as the first light cracked over the mountains. Dust curled around the vehicles like smoke, stinging eyes and throats. Sarah rode in the last Humvee, headset on, scanning the barren slopes through binoculars. Her mind worked in numbers: distance, elevation, wind speed, light. Each rock, each shadow became a coordinate in her mental map. Inside, Halle watched her reflection in the side mirror. Most snipers he'd met were twitchy, all nerves and coffee shakes. She was different, so calm it was unnerving. When the wind shifted, she raised her hand slightly, feeling it like a musician tuning an instrument. At grid point Delta 7, the team dismounted. The informant's beacon had last pinged from a small compound in the heart of the valley, 2 kilometers ahead. The plan was to approach through a dried riverbed, reach the compound by noon, and exfil before nightfall. But as they formed their line, Sarah paused, listening to something only she seemed to hear, the echo of metal on metal, carried faintly through the wind. "Hold," she said into her mic. The column froze. A second later, an explosion tore open the sand barely 30 meters ahead. The lead Humvee vanished in a bloom of fire and dust. Shrapnel whirled past like hornets. The men hit the dirt. "Contact?" Halle barked. Sarah was already on her stomach, sliding the Barrett from its case. She flipped the bipod open, checked wind again, and sighted through the cracked horizon. "Secondary device buried in the wash," she said calmly. "They expected vehicles. No visible shooters yet." "Copy," Halle replied, coughing through grit. "Everyone all right?" Daniels cursed, patting down his gear. "Guess we're walking now." The team moved forward on foot, staying low among the rocks. Sarah took point on a small rise, her rifle following her eyes. The sun climbed higher, throwing long spears of light across the valley. Every shimmer looked like a threat. Every gust could hide movement. By the time they reached the halfway mark, the valley felt alive, breathing, watching. Halle called a short halt. Sweat dripped from helmets. The heat was merciless. Daniels looked over at Sarah, still kneeling behind her scope. "You see anything, sharpshooter?" She didn't look up. "Not yet. But they see us." As if summoned by her words, the radio crackled with a chilling report from command. "Thermal confirms movement on northern ridge, multiple heat signatures." Hall swore under his breath. "We're not even at the compound." Sarah adjusted her scope one last time, tracking the faint flash of sunlight on metal high above. A sniper's glint, distant, patient. Her heartbeat slowed. She exhaled until her vision tunneled into the crosshairs. "Enemies at 1,500 meters, she said quietly. The team hit the ground, weapons up. Halle shouted, "Where?" "North Ridge. 2 shooters. Winds shifting east." He trusted her instantly. "Take the shot." Sarah steadied her breathing, pressed her cheek into the stock, and squeezed the trigger. The .50 caliber round roared like thunder, echoing through the valley. Through the scope, she saw the first target fold backward, the rifle tumbling from his hands. She adjusted, fired against second target, dropped before his finger reached the trigger. Silence returned, thick and unreal. Only the desert wind moved. Daniels peeked over his cover, wide-eyed. 1,500 meters? First try? Sarah rechambered smoothly. They were sloppy. The others stared, unsure whether to cheer or pray. Halle finally stood, brushing sand from his vest. "All right," he said. "You heard the lady. Move out before her grass gets tall again." As they advanced, Sarah lingered for a moment on the ridge, scanning once more. Her scope caught a single red flag tied to a rock Taliban marker, warning of snipers. Someone had been waiting for them here, long before dawn. She felt the familiar chill that came before every long hunt, the moment when the world grew too quiet, when life and death balanced on the thin edge of glass inside her scope. She closed the lens cap, whispered to no one, "Not today," and followed the team down into the valley. Behind her, the sun broke fully over the desert, flooding the tall grass in gold. The mission had begun, and though none of them knew it yet, every man there would leave the valley changed, some broken, some buried, and one remembered only as a whisper carried on the wind. By midday, the valley was a furnace. Heat shimmered off the sand until the horizon looked like liquid glass. The SEAL team moved in slow, crouched intervals through chest-high grass that whispered against their uniforms. Every crunch of boot or clink of gear sounded too loud. Lieutenant Sarah Miles walked last in line, her Barrett balanced easily across her shoulders. eyes hidden behind dust-scratched lenses. She didn't speak. She listened to the rhythm of the wind, to the absence of birds, to the silence that meant someone was waiting. Commander Hale halted them behind a cluster of half-collapsed mud walls. "Compound's 800 meters ahead," he said, checking his GPS. "Stay low. No radio chatter unless it's fire control." Daniels wiped sweat from his eyes. "Feels like we're walking into a damn oven." Sarah knelt beside him and raised her scope above the wall. Through the rippling air, she saw a stretch of stillness too still. "The grass is bent," she murmured. "Wind's wrong up there." Hale looked. To him, it was just brown and dust. But he'd learned in Afghanistan that when a sniper said the wind was wrong, you listened. "Everyone down," he ordered. They slid flat into the dirt. Seconds passed. Then a faint metallic pop broke the silence, followed by the thunder of a bullet slamming into stone inches from Hale's head. Another shot tore through the grass. The valley exploded in chaos. "Contact North Ridge." Someone yelled. 500 meters. Sarah's hands were already working. She unfolded the Barrett's bipod, slid the heavy rifle forward, and pressed her body into the earth. Her breathing slowed until everything else disappeared. The shouting, the heat, the fear. Only wind and numbers remained. Through the scope she caught a flash. A man's cheek pressed to a rifle stock, sunlight glinting off his scope lens. He was good steady posture, minimal movement. But he'd made one fatal mistake. He was facing the wind. Sarah dialed 1.5 mils of correction, exhaled halfway, and touched the trigger. The Barrett's roar rolled through the valley like thunder across canyon walls. Her first round hit exactly where she expected center mass. The enemy sniper vanished backward in a puff of red dust. Before the echo died, she shifted 2 degrees right, saw a second figure scrambling to adjust his rifle, and fired again. Another thunderclap. Another still body. Then silence. Only the wind remained. "Targets neutralized," she said evenly into her mic. The SEAL stared. Daniels broke the trance first. "2 shots? You're kidding me." Hale gave a thin smile. No one jokes with a Barrett. He peeked above the wall. The ridge was quiet. "All right, move." Whispers cleared the path. They advanced, spreading in staggered formation. Sarah took the rear overwatch again, scanning every ridge line. Her pulse had already returned to normal. To her, the shots were just math executed correctly. 20 minutes later, they reached a dried riverbed littered with rusted shell casings and goat bones. Hale called a halt to hydrate. Daniels tossed Sarah a bottle of warm water. "So," he said, trying for humor, "you always do magic tricks at 1,500 meters? Or was that just for us?" She unscrewed the cap, took a sip, and said, "Next time it'll be farther." "Cocky," he said with a grin. "Confident," she corrected, eyes still on her scope. The conversation ended when a distant echo rippled from the east short bursts, disciplined fire. Hale froze. "That's not random. They're signaling." Within seconds, the valley came alive. From the hillsides ahead, muzzle flashes blinked like fireflies. Bullets whined overhead, snapping through grass. The SEALs dove for cover. Multiple shooters, 2 o'clock and 10 o'clock. Sarah crawled behind a boulder, set up again. Her scope danced between targets, but the heat haze distorted everything. She switched to infrared bodies glowed bright white against the gray wash of desert. 6, maybe 7 enemies, moving fast, fanning out to encircle the team. She keyed her mic. "Hale, they're flanking. 10 seconds. Copy. Can you thin them out?" "Already working on it." Her first shot dropped the lead gunman mid-stride. The second round smashed through the rock where another hid, — spraying him with fragments. The enemy assault slowed, confused. 3 seconds. Copy. Can you thin them out? Already working on it. Her first shot dropped the lead gunman mid-stride. The second round smashed through the rock where another hid, — spraying him with fragments. The enemy assault slowed, confused. Hale used the gap to reposition his men. The medic dragged the wounded to a depression near a fallen wall. Sarah kept firing slow, measured, unstoppable. Every pull of the trigger sounded like final judgment. When her magazine clicked empty, the valley had gone quiet again. Daniels risked a glance over the wall. Jesus, you cleaned half the ridge. Sarah reloaded calmly. Half's not enough. As the smoke drifted away, Hale crawled beside her. We push now. They'll regroup soon. Sarah nodded. I'll cover. Move fast. The SEALs sprinted across the open wash, weaving through sparse cover. Sarah's rifle followed them like a guardian shadow. Every threat that rose from the grass fell before it fired a shot. By the time Hale reached the next cluster of rocks, he realized she'd saved them again. Whisper, he said through the headset, using the calsign she hadn't shared, but everyone now used instinctively. You still good? Still breathing? Then keep it that way. They regrouped in the shell of an abandoned farmhouse overlooking the valley floor. The air inside was stale with dust and goat dung. Sarah took a corner with a clear view of the northern approach, cleaning her rifle. Her gloves were blackened with powder, her face streaked with grit. Yet her movements remained precise, almost gentle. Hale approached, crouching beside her. You ever get tired of being perfect? She smiled faintly. Perfection's a myth. Survival's math. He chuckled, shaking his head. You talk like my high school physics teacher. She probably wasn't very popular either. For the first time, Hale saw something human beneath the armor, a trace of humor, maybe sadness. Before he could reply, command crackled over the radio. Intel update. Hostage confirmed alive. Enemy reinforcements inbound from East Ridge. Estimate 15 hostiles. Hale exhaled. Looks like round 2. Sarah slid the reassembled rifle onto her lap. Then we better make it quick. Dusk fell fast in the Afghan desert. The heat gave way to a brittle chill, and shadows stretched long over the valley. Through her scope, Sarah watched dark shapes gathering on the ridge line. They were disciplined, waiting for the sun to die before moving. The SEALs prepared defenses, laying claymores along the path, checking night vision gear. When the first star appeared, so did the enemy muzzle flashes. Tracers streaked red across the darkness. The farmhouse shuddered under impact. Sarah fired methodically, counting rounds. Each time her rifle spoke, another flash vanished. But there were too many. Bullets chewed the walls, splintered beams. A grenade landed outside, rocking the ground. Whisper, we're pinned. Hale shouted. I see it. She shifted position, rolled to the doorway, and sighted uphill. Her scope painted one heat signature after another. She fired until smoke swallowed everything. The roar of the Barrett was deafening inside the small room, but she didn't stop. Spent casings clattered around her knees. Then silence again. The ridge went still. Only the wind through grass answered. Hale looked out, stunned. You just stopped an entire assault. Sarah ejected the magazine, replaced it, and whispered, No, I just bought us time. When dawn finally touched the valley, the SEALs emerged to a surreal calm. The bodies of insurgents lay scattered across the ridge, dark specks against the pale sand. Smoke curled lazily upward. Birds had returned the first sound of life since the fight began. Daniels walked to Sarah, shaking his head in disbelief. You don't miss, do you? She looked past him at the rising sun. Everyone misses, she said softly. Just not today. The team moved out again, their trust in her now absolute. The woman they had doubted hours before had saved them twice, each time from enemies they couldn't even see. But to Sarah, the mission was far from over. She felt the weight of something unseen, still watching from beyond the next ridge. As they disappeared deeper into the valley, the tall grass swayed behind them, hiding the spent shells that glimmered in the sunlight, silent testimony to the legend that was beginning to take shape. The mission would be remembered for its danger, its miracles, and above all, for the moment when a quiet voice on the radio said, "Enemies at 1,500 meters," and changed everything. Night had swallowed the valley whole. The stars looked close enough to touch, scattered diamonds over an ocean of black. The SEAL team had dug into a rocky depression for the night, their small camp barely visible beneath camouflage netting. The air was thin, dry, almost silent except for the rhythmic click of a rifle bolt being cleaned and oiled with ritual precision. Sarah sat apart from the others, cross-legged on the cold ground. Her weapon rested across her knees, like a sleeping animal. The team huddled around a dim blue flame from a portable burner, heating rations that tasted more like sand than food. Every man there owed her his life, but none quite knew what to make of her. She'd arrived from nowhere, killed with inhuman precision, and carried herself with the composure of someone who'd already seen the end of the world. Daniels couldn't take the silence any longer. "You ever talk, Lieutenant?" he asked, forcing a grin. "Or is all that concentration part of the myth?" Sarah didn't glance up. "Myth? Yeah, you know. The one where some ghost sniper wipes out a Taliban platoon on her own and disappears before dawn." Halle shot him a warning look. "Ease up, Chief." But Sarah only smiled faintly. "Stories travel faster than truth out here." She ran a cloth down the long barrel, eyes unfocused, as if the motion itself anchored her thoughts. "You ever hear a bullet before it hits?" she asked suddenly. Daniels frowned. "You mean the crack?" "No," she said quietly. "The breath it takes before it breaks the air. There's a heartbeat in it. The moment when time hesitates. That's where I live." The men exchanged glances. There was no brag in her tone, only weariness, the calm of someone who had counted too many of those heartbeats. Halle settled beside her. "You weren't always military, were you?" Her hands stilled. For a long time, the only sound was the whisper of wind across the stones. Then she said, "No, I used to compete." "Compete?" "Olympic shooting. 10-meter air rifle. Gold in the Nationals when I was 20. My brother used to brag more than I did." She paused, eyes distant. "He was infantry. Iraq, 2007. His convoy got ambushed. No overwatch, no cover fire. I watched the footage later, frame by frame." Her voice thinned. "He never had a chance." Nobody spoke. The fire hissed softly. "I joined up the next month," she continued. "Told the recruiter I wanted to make sure someone like him always had an eye on the ridge." A ghost of a smile crossed her face. "Didn't think they'd actually take me." "They'd be idiots not to," Halle said quietly. "Most did." She closed the bolt, the sound crisp in the dark. "First few years, I trained in obscurity. The Marines called me too technical, too cold, but precision doesn't feel cold when you're the one counting bodies of your friends. So I kept shooting." Daniels leaned forward. "That explains the skill. Doesn't explain the legend." Sarah looked at him, expression unreadable. Legends happen when people stop listening after the first lie. Hours later, the team settled in for rest rotations. The valley had gone utterly still, the sort of silence that feels heavier than noise. Halle couldn't sleep. He moved to the ridge where Sarah kept watch, lying prone with the Barrett pointed toward the black horizon. He crawled beside her. "You think they'll come back tonight?" "They always come back," she said. "Pride is louder than fear. Doesn't bother you, sitting out here alone?" She gave a small shrug. "I'm never alone. The wind talks enough." He studied her profile in the starlight. "You know, my daughter's 10. She says she wants to shoot like Annie Oakley. I told her maybe she should meet you." Sarah's lips curved just slightly. Tell her to learn patience first. The trigger's the easy part. For a while, they just listened to wind through grass, to the hum of the desert. Holly realized this woman operated on a different frequency. Slower, quieter, dangerously precise. War hadn't hardened her. It had hollowed her into focus. Then, faintly, from far down the valley, came the bark of automatic fire, brief, distant, then gone. Sarah's scope was already on it. Contact? Holly asked. Testing range, she murmured. They're calibrating. Means they plan to move before sunrise. He sighed. So much for rest. Rest later, she said. Right now, breathe. Just before dawn, the wind shifted west. Sarah felt it first a whisper against her cheek, cool and sharp. She adjusted her dope sheet automatically. The air carried more than sand now. It carried a faint scent of diesel and sweat. Enemy movement. She touched her radio. Team, we've got motion in the low grass, bearing 095. Within seconds, the SEALs were up, rifles ready. Shapes emerged through the dim light 5, maybe 6 insurgents, creeping low with the Ks slung tight. They hadn't expected the Americans to still be there. Holly gestured silently. 2 SEALs flanked right. Sarah stayed prone, tracking the lead fighter through her scope. She didn't fire yet. Patience, always patience. When the man raised his rifle, she exhaled and pressed the trigger. The shot cracked, soft through the suppressor. The figure dropped without a sound. The rest scattered in panic, and the SEALs opened up. It was over in less than a minute. The grass settled. The smell of gunpowder mingled with wild thyme. Holly checked his men, no injuries. Good call, he said. Sarah was already reloading. That wasn't the attack, she replied. That was the scout team. Her accuracy sent a chill through him. How do you know? They didn't shoot back, she said. They were counting. When full daylight burned across the horizon, the team packed to move. As they advanced, the conversation from the night before lingered between them, a new understanding of the quiet woman behind the rifle. She wasn't just deadly. She was purposeful. Every trigger pull carried the echo of her brother's last breath, and that weight drove her deeper into precision than most could survive. Daniels jogged beside Holly, whispering, "She's something else, huh?" "Something dangerous," Holly answered. "And thank God she's on our side." They reached higher ground overlooking the target compound. The mud brick structures looked abandoned from a distance, but Sarah's optics caught fresh tire tracks curving behind the walls, and a shimmer of heat that could only come from running engines. "They're inside," she confirmed. Holly called for positions. "Whisper on overwatch. Rest of us breach on my mark." Sarah settled behind her rifle again, crosshair steady. As the SEALs crept closer, she whispered numbers, distance, wind drift, timing each word a thread holding the team together. Holly found himself relying on her calm voice more than the plan. Inside her head, though, another voice whispered her brother's, the one that always returned when the fight began. She saw flashes of his convoy burning on an Iraqi road, heard the scream she'd never let escape her own throat. It had forged her. It still haunted her. She blinked it away. The mission was all that mattered now. When the SEALs breached, the compound erupted in chaos, gunfire, shouts, the boom of a breaching charge. Sarah's rifle spoke in measured rhythm, removing threats before they reached the windows. Through the scope, she saw Holly dragging a hostage bound, bleeding but alive, out into the yard. Relief flickered in her chest. Then movement caught her eye on the far ridge, a flash of light, the unmistakable glint of a high-caliber scope aimed directly at Holly. Her breath froze. Sniper, 2,000 meters. She shouted. There was no time to calculate. She rolled onto her side, adjusted elevation by instinct, and fired. The recoil slammed her shoulder. The bullet vanished into the heat. 1 heartbeat. 2. Then the opposing muzzle flash winked out. "Target down," she whispered. Halle turned, realizing how close it had been. His eyes met hers across the distance. Gratitude, disbelief, respect. The radio crackled with Command's voice. "Package secured. Exfil in 15 mics." Sarah lowered her rifle slowly, exhaling the tension she'd carried all night. Around her, the wind rose again, rustling the grass in long, slow waves. The valley looked peaceful now, almost serene, but she knew peace never lasted here. Hale's voice came softly over the headset. "Whisper. Remind me never to doubt you again." She smiled, unseen. "You'll forget by tomorrow." "Not this time," he said. "Not after today." As the team regrouped for extraction, Sarah glanced back toward the mountains. Somewhere out there lay the ghosts of every shot she'd taken, the lives ended, the lives saved. She thought of her brother again, and for a fleeting second she felt him near, standing beside her in the wind. Then she turned away, tightening the strap of her rifle. The mission wasn't over. The valley still had teeth, and the day was just beginning. The Black Hawks thundered low over the mountain ridge, their rotors slicing the morning air into chaos. Below them, the valley stretched like an open wound dust, rock, and scattered ruins from a war that never seemed to end. Inside the lead helicopter, Commander Hall sat strapped in beside Sarah, both silent beneath the roar of the engines. The team was en route to an extraction point that had gone dark 2 hours earlier. Intel suggested an ambush. Everyone knew what that meant. Sarah checked her Barrett one last time, fingers moving with mechanical precision. Halle watched her from the corner of his eye. Her calm unnerved him sometimes. How she could be so utterly still when every man around her felt the rush of adrenaline. She had that sniper's serenity, the kind that came from living in the spaces between breaths. "Whisper," he said through the headset, using her call sign. "What do you see down there?" She lifted her monocular, scanning through the window. The valley shimmered under the heat haze, but her trained eyes picked out movement along the ridge-line, tiny flashes, too controlled to be random. "Tripods," she said. "Heavy machine guns. 3 nests. They're waiting." Halle cursed under his breath. "They know our route. Then we change it," she replied simply. He nodded. The pilot veered east, skimming the cliff's edge. Below, the landscape opened into a labyrinth of dry riverbeds and caves perfect for an ambush or an escape. They landed a mile from the expected LZ, kicking up a storm of dust. The air hit them like a furnace the moment the rotors died. The team fanned out instantly, rifles raised, eyes sharp. Halle gave hand signals move quiet, spread wide, eyes on the ridge. Sarah dropped to one knee, setting up her spotting scope. Through the lens, she could see the abandoned compound they'd left behind, now swarming with enemy fighters. They were late. Not by much, but enough that timing had saved them. Daniels crouched beside her. "They really thought we'd walk into that?" "Confidence kills," Sarah said. He grinned. "Guess they're about to learn that." They moved through the valley like shadows, each step calculated, each sound deliberate. The silence was suffocating. Sarah felt it pressing against her eardrums, a silence too perfect to be natural. Her instincts screamed warning before her radio hissed to life. "Contact front." The first explosion hit before Halle could answer. The ground tore open 50 meters ahead, flinging rock and sand like shrapnel. The blast wave sent the team diving for cover. "Mortar!" Halle shouted. "Move! Spread!" Sarah rolled behind a boulder, heart pounding. Her scope was already up, scanning the horizon. She caught the glint far on the ridge, a mortar team adjusting their aim. Too far for the rifles. Not for her. She dropped prone, steadying her breath. The world narrowed to the crosshairs. Wind, 5 knots east. Distance, 1,740 meters. Angle, down 6 degrees. She didn't think. She simply became the shot. The trigger broke clean. 1 heartbeat. Then the far ridge bloomed with dust and flame. The mortar fell silent. Hale's voice came through the static. Confirmed hit. Good work, whisper. But she wasn't done. Another glint, higher on the ridge's spotter adjusting coordinates. She shifted, compensated for the heat shimmer, and fired again. A second bloom of dust. Silence. The team began to move again, ducking between shattered rocks and thorn bushes. Sarah followed, scanning constantly. Each breath, each twitch of wind mattered. She wasn't just protecting them from enemies. She was fighting against distance, physics, and time. By midday, the heat had become unbearable. Sweat soaked their uniforms. Dust coated every inch of exposed skin. The team halted in the shadow of a rocky cliff. Hale checked his GPS, still half a mile from the fallback extraction zone. Daniels knelt, pulling off his helmet. If we stay much longer, the sun'll roast us alive. Sarah looked up at the cliffs, eyes narrowing. We won't have to worry about heat if they find us first. As if summoned by her words, a faint metallic ping echoed across the rocks. Everyone froze. A second later came the unmistakable sound of a sniper round ricocheting off stone inches from Hale's head. Sniper, move. The team scrambled for cover. Sarah didn't move. She pressed her cheek to the scope, scanning. The enemy sniper was good, no muzzle flash, no reflection, using the sun at his back. But good wasn't enough. She slowed her breathing, tracing where the shot had come from, not the obvious ridge, but slightly lower, where the light bent oddly. There, a shimmer of mirage against the rock. She adjusted elevation. Her finger hovered over the trigger. Then she saw him, young, calm, focused, a mirror of herself. For a fraction of a second, she hesitated, not out of mercy, but recognition. Then she exhaled and fired. The shot took him through the scope. His rifle fell silent forever. Daniels peeked out. Sniper down? Sarah nodded once. He was waiting for me. Guess he wasn't patient enough. She didn't answer. Deep down, she knew the truth. He had been patient. Just not perfect. And in this world, imperfection was fatal. The team pressed on, hugging the canyon walls. Drones buzzed faintly overhead, friendly, for now. The radio crackled again with Command's voice. SEAL Team Echo, Exfil Point Bravo confirmed secure. ETA 20 minutes. Copy that, Hale replied. We're moving. Sarah hung back slightly, covering their rear. The terrain opened into a dry riverbed, littered with shattered vehicles. Something about it felt wrong, too clean, too quiet. She raised a hand. Hold, what is it? Hale asked. She crouched, brushing sand aside. Wires. Thin, almost invisible. She followed the line with her eyes straight to a pile of debris rigged with explosives. Booby trap, she said. Remote trigger. Can you disarm it? She shook her head. Too many linked charges. It's not meant to stop us. It's meant to delay us. Daniels muttered. So we're walking right into... The explosion cut him off. The charge went off behind them, sealing the path they'd come from in a wall of fire and smoke. Rocks rained down. The valley roared. Hale coughed through the dust. They boxed us in. Not yet, Sarah said. She pointed to a narrow fissure in the cliff. There's a way through. It'll take us above the extraction zone. Hale didn't hesitate. Move. The climb was brutal, steep, exposed, every rock hot enough to burn skin. The team moved like ghosts, driven by instinct and exhaustion. Sarah climbed last, scanning below with every pause. Shadows flickered in the smoke. They were being followed. Halfway up, a voice crackled through the radio, a distorted male voice speaking Pashto, then English. "You kill my brother. I see you, sniper. I see you." Sarah froze. The accent. The tone. It was the spotter, the one she'd hit earlier. Somehow, he'd survived. "Keep moving," Holly ordered. She didn't argue. But her pulse pounded. She'd made enemies before, but this felt personal. She could almost feel the man's eyes on her through the haze. By the time they reached the ridge, the sun was a white blade in the sky. The team collapsed under a rock ledge, panting. Below them stretched the extraction zone, an open plain dotted with wreckage and the faint shape of a downed hello. "Command, we have visual," Holly reported. "Looks like the chopper's been hit. No movement." "Copy," Command replied. "Reinforcements en route. Hold position." Hold, the one-order soldiers always hated. Sarah lay flat, scope trained on the wreck. Through the shimmering heat, she saw movement, 3 men dragging something from the cabin. Not supplies. "A pilot, alive. We have a hostage," she whispered. "Range?" Halle asked. 600 meters. Wind from west, 5 knots. "I can take the shot. Do it." She centered the crosshairs on the nearest captor's chest. Slow breath. Squeeze. The rifle kicked. A man dropped. The others dove for cover, dragging the pilot with them. Before she could reacquire, the radio crackled again with that same cold voice. "You can't hide, whisper." Her blood ran cold. How did he know her call sign? Then she saw him on the opposite ridge, a dark figure with a scope glinting in the sun. He was aiming straight at her. "Sniper, 2 o'clock." She yelled. Hale's shout overlapped hers. "Take him down." But for the first time in years, Sarah felt uncertainty. He was fast, skilled, and he'd learned from her last shot. She adjusted, heart hammering. 2 snipers, 2 breaths, 1 trigger pull. The world narrowed to a heartbeat. She fired. A split second later, another shot cracked, so close it tore through her sleeve, grazing her arm. She rolled behind the rock, pain looming like fire. "Whisper, you hit?" Halle called. "Just a graze," she hissed, pressing her arm. "He's better than I thought." She peeked through the scope again. The opposing sniper was gone, move, or waiting. The wind howled through the canyon, carrying the echo of his voice again. "This is not finished." Sarah lowered her rifle, breathing hard. Her team was safe for now, but she knew this wasn't over. Somewhere out there, another marksman had set his sights on her, someone who had studied her work, her patterns, her patience. And he wasn't going to stop. As the sun bled red over the jagged horizon, Halle gave the order to dig in for the night. Reinforcements would come at dawn. Sarah sat against the rocks, cleaning her rifle with trembling fingers. The blood from her arm had already dried. Across the valley, the shadows stretched long and sharp like crosshairs reaching for her. The hunt wasn't finished. It had only just begun. Night draped itself over the valley like a black veil. The heat of day led away, leaving the rocks cold and the air brittle. The SEAL team lay hidden beneath a jagged outcrop, their breathing shallow, their nerves pulled tight as bowstrings. The smell of gunpowder still lingered, mingling with the metallic scent of blood. Sarah sat apart, her rifle across her lap, the moonlight glinting on the barrel. Her arm burned where the last sniper's bullet had grazed her, but she ignored the pain. Pain was information. It told her she was still alive. The others slept in short, uneasy bursts, but she couldn't close her eyes. Somewhere beyond those ridges, a man was watching, waiting. And he wasn't guessing anymore. He knew her. Hale crawled over, crouching beside her. "You should rest. You've been awake 36 hours straight." "I'll rest when he stops breathing," she said quietly, scanning the darkness through her scope. He studied her for a moment. "You think it's personal?" She didn't answer right away. In her mind, she replayed the voice on the radio, rough, controlled, almost calm. "You kill my brother." It wasn't just revenge. It was a mirror of her own reason for fighting. "Yes," she said finally. "He's hunting me. And he's good." Hale exhaled slowly. "Then we find him first." Before dawn, the seals split into pairs and began to sweep the upper ridge. Sarah moved with Daniels, their boots silent on loose shale. The moon was sinking when she caught it, the faintest reflection on a distant rock face, gone in a blink. "Not sunlight, glass. Contact," she whispered. 1.6 clicks, high ground, north ridge. Daniels brought up his scope. "I don't see." The rifle cracked. The round hit the rock inches from his head, showering them with stone fragments. He dove behind cover, cursing. "He's got eyes on us." Sarah's pulse stayed steady. She crawled behind a boulder, adjusted her bipod, and angled the barrel toward the source. Through the scope, she saw nothing but shadow and heat shimmer. He was using a thermal shield, masking his body against the rock's warmth. Smart. She closed her eyes briefly, feeling the wind on her cheek. 3 knots crosswind. Slight drop from the ridge. He's left-handed. That's why the angle's off. She opened her eyes, shifted her aim 5 meters left, and waited. The world went still. Seconds stretched into minutes. Then, a flicker, the tiniest movement of cloth. She fired. The echo rolled through the valley. A bird burst from the rocks, startled into flight. But there was no cry, no motion. The target vanished into silence again. "Did you get him?" Daniels asked. "Maybe," she said. "Or maybe he's smarter than that." When the sun rose, command finally made contact. Reinforcements were 6 hours out. Too long. Hale ordered the team to dig in near the ridge for a defensive position. The landscape was treacherous, sharp inclines, narrow ledges, cliffs that dropped hundreds of feet. Perfect sniper country. Sarah positioned herself, overlooking the valley. Through her scope she could see the wrecked helicopter below, now little more than twisted metal. The hostiles had withdrawn, regrouping somewhere she couldn't see. But she could feel them. Every instinct screamed that they were being watched. Hale joined her. "You really think he's still out there?" "He's patient," she said. "And pride won't let him leave unfinished work." Hale sighed. "You sound like you know him." "I do," she murmured. "Just like he knows me." Hours passed. The sun climbed high, turning the air into a shimmering furnace. Daniels was on comms when the static cut through a faint whisper, barely audible. ... whisper, ... "Come find me." Sarah froze. The voice was calm, deliberate, taunting. It came from their own frequency. She grabbed the handset. "Identify yourself?" Silence. Then a low chuckle. "You missed." The line went dead. Daniel stared at her. How the hell did he get on our channel? Sarah's jaw tightened. "He's close enough to intercept." Hale swore. "That means he's within a kilometer." Sarah's eyes narrowed behind her scope. "Then let's end this." They set a trap. Hale's plan was simple. Draw the enemy sniper into revealing his position. Sarah would act as bait. Against every instinct, she agreed. "If he wants me, he'll come," she said. At dusk, she moved out into the open, carrying a decoy rifle slung across her shoulder. The others took hidden positions across the ridge. The wind had shifted again steady, whispering eastward, carrying sand that stung her face. She knelt beside a rock, appearing casual, and waited. Minutes passed. Then flash. The unmistakable flicker of sunlight off glass. "Got him," Halle whispered through the radio. "Northeast ridge, 800 meters." Sarah's heart steadied. She lay prone, unslinging the real rifle. "Hold fire. He'll move." Sure enough, the glint vanished, then reappeared 30 meters right. He was maneuvering, just as she had predicted. She tracked the movement, her finger resting lightly on the trigger. "Come on," she murmured. "Show me who you are." Through the crosshairs, she finally saw him lean, dark-haired, the same controlled stillness she knew too well. The rifle looked almost identical to hers. Their eyes met through scopes separated by half a mile of empty air. Two predators. One breath. They fired simultaneously. The shots collided in a thunderclap of sound, the bullets grazing paths within inches of each other. Sarah rolled to her side, reloaded in one smooth motion, and fired again before he could reset. This time her round struck true. The figure jerked, rifle tumbling from his grip. "Target down," she said, voice steady. But the relief didn't come. She watched through her scope as he fell back, clutching his side, then disappeared behind the ridge. "Not dead, not yet." "Whisper," Halle called. "You got him?" "Wounded," she said. "He's not done." The sun dropped fast, painting the valley in red and gold. Halle gave orders to hold position, but Sarah couldn't shake the feeling. The man would come again. Pride demanded it. She spent the evening cleaning her rifle, her fingers steady despite exhaustion. Each motion was deliberate habit born of survival. The wind carried faint sounds from far below. A cough, a rock sliding, or maybe imagination. But she knew better. Sometime after midnight, she caught the sound again closer now. A soft crunch of gravel, then silence. She raised her rifle and waited. The moonlight revealed a shadow moving between boulders 50 meters ahead. Too close for comfort. She switched to her sidearm and whispered into her radio. Movement, close range. Before Halle could respond, a voice came from the dark. "You shoot well, Whisper." Sarah's blood chilled. He was speaking English now, clear and cold. "You shouldn't have missed." "I didn't," she said quietly. The man stepped into the moonlight, blood soaking his shoulder, but rifle steady in his hands. He looked younger than she expected, maybe late 20s, eyes sharp with fury and respect all at once. "You killed my brother," he said. "In the village. 2 years ago." Sarah's memory flickered dust, chaos, a firefight outside Kandahar. A shot through a window. A hostile with a radio, calling mortar fire on her team. She'd taken the shot. Clean. Necessary. She had never known his name. "I remember," she said. He was targeting civilians. The man's jaw tightened. He was defending them. "No," she replied softly. He was using them. They stood there, two soldiers carved by opposite truths. Then his finger tightened on the trigger. Sarah moved first. Her sidearm barked once. He staggered back, the rifle slipping from his grasp. She caught him before he fell, lowering him gently to the ground. His eyes met hers, fading but still burning. "You live like a ghost," he whispered. "So do you," she said. Then he was gone. The team found her minutes later, kneeling beside the body. Halle placed a hand on her shoulder. "It's over." She shook her head slowly. "It's never over." Halle crouched beside her. "You did what you had to." She looked down at the man's lifeless face. "That's what we always say." The dawn light crept across the ridge, cold and merciless. For the first time in years, Sarah felt the weight of every trigger pull pressing down on her chest. The duel was finished, but victory felt hollow. She wasn't sure who had won, the living or the dead. She stood, slinging her rifle. "Let's go," she said. "We still have to make it out." As they moved toward the extraction point, the wind rose again, whispering through the tall grass below. To the others, it was just wind. But to Sarah, it carried a message, faint, fleeting, like the breath before a bullet breaks the air. Smoke rolled through the valley like a living, thin gray tendrils twisting between the rocks, curling over the bodies of the fallen. The once clear Afghan morning had turned into chaos. Fire, dirt, and metal raining from the sky. The SEALs were pinned behind shattered vehicles, their comms hissing with static. The sharp cracks of rifles echoed from unseen cliffs, and every time someone moved, the dust beside them spat up from another sniper's bullet. Sarah Miles lay flat on her stomach atop a jagged ridge, her ears ringing from the blast that had thrown her there moments ago. The familiar weight of her Barrett M82 felt wrong now. The scope cracked, the stock splintered. Her hands shook, streaked with blood, but her eyes remained cold, calculating. She blinked hard, clearing grit from her lashes, and tried to focus through the broken lens. The world was distorted. Below her, the SEALs were fighting to stay alive. Lieutenant Harris barked orders, voice rough and urgent. "We're surrounded north, east, and south. Where the hell is that sniper fire coming from?" Sarah adjusted, rolling slightly onto her side to avoid a spray of bullets that chewed through the rock inches from her head. Her mind ran through distances, angles, elevation. She didn't need a perfect scope, she needed instinct. Years of training and the ghost of memory from every range she'd ever shot on came flooding back. "Whisper, report." Harris's voice crackled through the radio, calling her by the code name she'd earned long ago. "I'm here," she replied, calm as ever, her breath steady despite the chaos. Scopes down. Rifles hurt. But I'm still in the game. "You're bleeding, Miles," Harris snapped. "We can see the smoke from your ridge." "I've been worse," she said flatly, loading a single .50 caliber round into the chamber. The familiar metallic click steadied her heartbeat. "You move when I say move." Through the haze, she saw movement, a group of insurgents, hauling an RPG up onto a ledge opposite the SEALs. Her pulse slowed. That launcher could vaporize half the team in seconds. She wiped blood from her cheek, shifted her elbow slightly, and tried to sight them through the cracked glass. Everything looked bent, skewed, wrong. Wind 2 knots north. Distance maybe 1,200, she murmured to herself. Her finger rested gently on the trigger, but the image kept flickering in her view. Then she froze. One of the insurgents lifted the launcher, taking aim. Her mind went still. No more thoughts. No fear. No pain. Only the math of survival. She fired. The rifle thundered, recoiling into her bruised shoulder. The bullet screamed through the air, finding the RPG just as the enemy was about to launch. For one perfect instant, it was pure silence. Then the sky exploded. Fire bloomed mid-air, the blast wave flattening grass and rock alike. The enemy position vanished in a storm of debris. The SEALs looked up in disbelief. "Holy hell," one of them gasped over the comms. "She just shot a rocket out of the air." Sarah exhaled slowly, smoke curling from the barrel of her broken rifle. Her heartbeat barely changed. "Keep moving," she said into the radio. "We're not dying here today." But her moment of triumph was short-lived. She heard the distinct ping of rounds striking near her ridge. Through the dust, shadows moved. 2 enemy snipers were flanking her position, fast and quiet. She knew she couldn't reload the Barrett in time. Sarah rolled behind a boulder and reached for the fallen SEAL rifle beside her, a lighter M4, not meant for long-distance shooting, but good enough for close contact. She switched positions, crawling along the edge of the ridge, using the wind and smoke as cover. Her ribs ached from the earlier blast, but she ignored it. "Whisper, we're pushing toward extraction point Bravo," Harris said. "2 birds inbound in 10 minutes. You copy?" "Copy," she whispered back. "Buy me 3 minutes." "3 minutes? You're outnumbered." "Then tell them to make it count." She peered through the red dot sight of the M4. The first sniper appeared, a flicker of movement, a reflection from his scope. Sarah didn't hesitate. 2 rounds, center mass. The second enemy fired at the same moment, his shot grazing her shoulder and tearing through her sleeve. She dropped flat, rolled, and popped up again, just long enough to return fire. His head jerked back. Silence followed. Her shoulder burned, but she pushed herself up. The SEALs were running now, carrying the wounded. The enemy was regrouping, shouting in the distance. Sarah knew what would happen next. They'd call for mortar fire. The ridge she was on would be leveled within minutes. She pressed her radio again. "Harris, you're almost clear. Keep heading west through the ravine. I'll slow them down." "Negative?" he barked. "That's an order, fall back." Sarah allowed herself a brief smile. "With respect, sir, you'll have to court-martial me later." Then she disappeared into the smoke. Moving low, she found a new vantage point, a shallow trench overlooking the valley. Through the static in her comms, she heard the choppers approaching, the faint rhythmic chop of rotor blades cutting the air. Salvation was near. She checked her magazine, half empty. Enough. Enemy fighters began pouring into the valley below, shouting commands. She took them one by one, her shots measured, deliberate. For every burst she fired, another soldier made it closer to the evac zone. She counted silently, marking each kill not as a victory, but as time bought for the men she was protecting. At last, her rifle clicked empty. She tossed it aside, grabbing a sidearm from her vest. The sound of gunfire was fading. The SEALs had reached the birds. Sarah took one last look across the battlefield. Smoke rose in pillars where the sun once shone, the valley now scarred and silent, except for the echoing thump of helicopter blades. She touched the cracked scope of her Barrett and whispered, "You did good." Then, over the radio, "Team secure." Repeat, "Team secure." Extraction complete. Harris's voice followed a second later, ragged with relief. "Whisper, where are you?" "We're loaded up. Get to the LZ." But she didn't answer. The ground beneath her trembled, a final mortar round incoming. Sarah sprinted down the ridge, diving behind a broken wall just as the explosion tore through her position. The blast threw her hard into the dirt. For a moment, everything went black. When she opened her eyes, the choppers were rising into the sky, fading into the distance. Her ears rang, her vision blurred, but she saw the mission was done. Every SEAL had made it out alive. She pulled herself to her feet, every muscle screaming. Smoke drifted around her as she limped toward the shadow of a hill. She could have called for pickup. She could have asked for help. But she didn't. Instead, she reached into her vest, pulled out a small metal tag, her brother's dog tag, and pressed it against her lips. "Mission complete," she whispered. Behind her, the valley was burning, a last echo of battle fading into silence. And then, just as she came, she vanished into the tall grasser figures swallowed by the landscape, her rifle slung across her back. To the SEALs, she would become a legend. To the enemy, a ghost. To herself, she was just a soldier who'd kept her promise. And somewhere, carried on the wind between the ridges, a faint echo lingered. One last gunshot, sharp and clean, reminding the world that Whisper was still out there, watching. The valley was an inferno. Smoke plumed upward, turning the sunrise into a blood-red haze. The seals were battered, bleeding, but alive. They sprinted through waist-high grass toward the western ridge where the Ori extraction point waited, a small clearing that barely fit 2 choppers. The rhythmic thud of rotor blades echoed across the valley, hope cutting through the chaos. Lieutenant Harris led the charge, shouting over the roar. "Move, move, move." 2 minutes to pick up. Behind him, Petty Officer Cruz half carried a wounded teammate, sweat and blood streaking his face. "She's still up there," he yelled. "Whisper's covering us." Harris didn't reply, but his jaw clenched. He could hear the distant bursts of Sarah's rifle, echoing from the ridge, sharp, precise, unrelenting. Every shot meant she was still alive. Every shot meant she was buying them time. The first helicopter touched down, wind and dust whipping in violent circles. The door gunner scanned the horizon, laying down suppressive fire. "Get the wounded on first," he shouted. The team obeyed, dragging their injured brothers aboard. The second bird hovered 100 feet away, waiting for clearance. Then Harris turned toward the ridge and froze. Through the smoke, he saw her. Sarah Miles' Whisper, silhouetted against the firelight, her figure small yet uncheckable. The sun caught the gleam of her cracked rifle, slung across her shoulder like a trusted friend. Her uniform was torn, streaked with ash and blood, but her stance was steady. She was still fighting alone, deliberate, defiant. "Whisper, it's time," Harris yelled into the comm. "Get your ass down here." "That's an order." Her voice came back, calm, almost serene. "Negative, sir. Still have movement at your 6. You leave now, or they'll flank the LZ. Damn it, we'll hold position." "No," she cut in sharply. "I said go. I'll cover you from here." The radio hissed, her words vanishing into static. A second later, Harris saw it, a group of enemy fighters breaking through the far tree line, charging toward the extraction zone. Bullets sliced the air. The SEALs dove for cover, firing back. And then Sarah's rifle spoke again. 1 shot, 2, 3, each perfectly timed, impossibly accurate. Every insurgent that moved dropped before they could fire. "Target down." "Move," she whispered through the comms, her tone as calm as if she were back on the range. The team regrouped and sprinted to the waiting helicopter. Cruz glanced back, his heart hammering. "We can't leave her," he shouted. Harris hesitated. His duty screamed at him to extract his men, but every instinct told him not to leave her behind. "Whisper, last call, fall back." He barked into the radio. Silence. Then her voice, faint and final. "Tell them. He's safe now." Before Harris could respond, a thunderous explosion rocked the ridge. Flames and dust erupted where she'd been standing. The force knocked him backward, slamming him into the chopper's side. "Go! Go!" the pilot shouted. The helicopter lifted off, rising through the haze. The second bird followed, its gunners firing bursts into the burning valley below. From above, Harris scanned the ground desperately, eyes searching for any sign of her. All he saw was smoke. No movement. No signal. Nothing. The ridge was gone. The flight back to base was silent, except for the hum of the rotors. The SEALs sat slumped in exhaustion, their faces smeared with ash. Some stared blankly ahead, others bowed their heads. The only sound was the rhythmic thump of the helicopter blades, a dull heartbeat over the desert. Harris finally broke the silence. "Status check. Everyone accounted for?" "Everyone but her," Cruz said quietly, looking out the window. "She saved us all, and we left her there." No one replied. When they landed at Bagram Airfield, medical teams rushed forward, pulling the wounded onto stretchers. Harris stepped off last, his mind still replaying the explosion, the heat, the sound, her final words. Inside the command tent, he made his report to Colonel Reeves, the mission commander. The older man listened in silence, hands clasped behind his back. When Harris finished, Reeves nodded slowly. "Lieutenant Miles' body?" Reeves asked. "No sign," Harris said. "We combed the valley from the air on the way out. The ridge was gone. If she didn't make it out before the blast." Reeves sighed. "Understood." He turned to a nearby officer. "Mark her Kia. File is classified under Operation Thunder Veil." Harris's eyes flared. "With respect, sir, she deserves more than a red stamp and a classified file." Reeves looked at him, his expression unreadable. "Lieutenant, what she did saved 6 men? That's not something we forget. But the nature of her assignment means it doesn't get written into reports. She wasn't supposed to exist in that valley." "What does that mean?" Harris demanded. "It means she was loaned to us under Special Activities Command. Black Operations. If she survived, she's already been pulled off the grid." Harris clenched his fists. "And if she didn't?" Reeves paused, his voice low. "Then her story ends where the ghosts live between what's said and what's never written." That night, the SEALs gathered at the base bar. The air smelled of whiskey and dust. No music played. Just the quiet murmur of men who'd been through hell together. Cruz set a small metal tag on the table, a scorched dog tag they'd found near the ridge during extraction. The name was half burned, but one word remained. "Miles," he whispered. "She really was something, huh?" Harris stared at the tag for a long moment. "She was the best shot I've ever seen," he said softly. "Didn't miss. Not once." Another SEAL raised his glass. "To whisper." They all followed, their voices low but firm. "To whisper." The glasses clinked, echoing faintly in the dim room. As the night wore on, stories began to surface, fragments of things they'd heard about her before she joined their mission. A sniper who'd ended a siege in Syria with one shot. A ghost rumored to have saved a convoy in Iraq from a mile out. A woman who vanished from every record as soon as her mission was done. "She wasn't just a soldier," Cruz murmured. "She was a damn myth." Harris didn't reply. He just kept staring at the dog tag, the flickering light from the bar's single bulb dancing across the metal. He thought of her final words. Tell them he's safe now. The next morning, a classified transmission arrived at base. No sender ID, no signature, just a single image attachment. It showed a familiar rifle leaning against a rock, perfectly cleaned, the scope replaced. And beside it, pressed into the dirt, a single bullet casing with 3 words etched into it. "Still watching." Harris's hand trembled slightly as he showed it to Cruz. This can't be real." Cruz smiled faintly. "Maybe she's still out there. Maybe she's not done." Harris looked out toward the horizon, the mountains glowing gold in the dawn light. Somewhere out there, beyond the ridges and valleys, the wind carried faint echoes of a single gunshot, sharp, clean, final. And in that moment, he knew the truth. Whisper wasn't gone. She had simply returned to the shadows that birthed her, the unseen war, the quiet places where heroes had no names. Because legends don't die. They disappear. And somewhere in the tall grass of another forgotten battlefield, Lieutenant Sarah Miles' whisper was already sighting her next target. The weeks following Operation Thunder Veil were heavy with silence. The mission's success had been recorded as strategically significant, yet the official report mentioned only 7 SEALs, no sniper, no overwatch, no whisper. The classified pages buried Sarah Miles deeper than any grave could. But the soldiers who had stood beside her, who had heard her voice over the combs, refused to forget. In the barracks, her name became a murmur passed, like a secret prayer from one team to another. You ever hear of the ghost in the tall grass? Yeah, the one who shot the rocket mitter? The stories twisted and spread, half fact, half reverence. Every retelling made her more than human. Some said she could hit a moving target from 2 miles away. Others swore she vanished before extraction because the CIA pulled her back into the shadows. Lieutenant Harris didn't join the gossip. He carried the truth like a scar. Every night, he replayed her final words, "Tell them he's safe now." He didn't know what they meant, but they haunted him. Sometimes he'd wake in his bunk, sweating, hearing a single gunshot echo in the dark. 3 months later, Harris was summoned to Washington for debriefing. The Pentagon's halls were all marble and silence, decorated with portraits of men whose names history had remembered. He stood before a panel of officers who read his report line by line, coldly clinical. When they finished, one of them, a general with silver hair and distant eyes, asked, "Lieutenant, do you believe Lieutenant Miles survived?" Harris paused. "Sir, I believe if anyone could, it was her." The general exchanged a knowing glance with another officer. "That's all, Lieutenant. You're dismissed." As Harris turned to leave, the general added quietly, "For what it's worth, the world needs people like her, but it doesn't need to know them." Outside, rain lashed against the Capitol's stone steps. Harris lit a cigarette and stared out at the gray city. He had no proof she was alive, but something inside him refused to believe she was gone. Half a world away, in a forgotten stretch of Eastern Europe, a convoy of NATO vehicles rolled through an abandoned industrial town. The soldiers joked, smoked, and cursed the cold. They didn't know they were being watched. A sniper lay on a ruined rooftop, wrapped in a ghillie suit that blended perfectly with the crumbling brick. Her face was obscured beneath a hood, her scope glinting faintly in the weak sunlight. Through the crosshairs, she tracked movement 3 armed men in black fatigues planting explosives along the road. The convoy was heading straight into a trap. Her breathing slowed. One squeeze of the trigger. One man down. Another breath. Another shot. By the time the NATO soldiers reached the street, the danger was gone. They found no sign of who had saved them, only 2 perfect bullet holes and a single empty casing on the pavement. Stamped into the brass were the letters. WM. The local commander shrugged it off as luck. But one of the younger soldiers picked up the casing and muttered, "Whisper Miles. I've heard of her. Ghost sniper, right?" The commander smirked. "Ghosts don't save convoys, kid. They haunt them." Back in the States, Harris had been reassigned to training new recruits at Coronado. It was supposed to be a peaceful post, a way to settle the ghosts. But one afternoon, while reviewing marksmanship footage, something caught his eye. A trainee had made an impossible shot 1,700 meters, with crosswinds. The instructors were in awe. Harris leaned closer to the playback, studying the stance, the technique. It was clean, minimal, efficient, too perfect. Afterward, he found the trainee sitting alone by the range, adjusting a rifle. She was tall, composed, her eyes cool and distant. On her wrist, under the sleeve of her uniform, he saw a faint scar, a burn mark, circular, like a rifle barrel's kiss. "Hell of a shot," Harris said. She didn't look up. "Just muscle memory, sir." Something about the tone, the flat confidence, the ghost of a smirk made his chest tighten. He studied her face, but it was unreadable. "What's your name, recruit?" "Private Miles, sir." The cigarette between his fingers trembled slightly. "Any relation?" She finally looked up, eyes sharp and steady. "Wouldn't know, sir. Never met her." For a heartbeat, their gazes locked. Then she stood, saluted crisply, and walked away, leaving Harris staring after her. torn between disbelief and the faintest flicker of hope. Months passed. The world kept moving, new missions, new headlines, new heroes. But in certain corners of the military, whispers persisted. In Syria, insurgents spoke of a phantom who hunted at night, whose rifle silenced camps without warning. In Africa, a rebel outpost found their sentries dead at dawn, each shot precise through the eye, each casing engraved with the same initials. The CIA denied everything. The Pentagon said nothing. But among the SEALs, the legend only grew. They said Whisper never missed. They said she only appeared when the odds were impossible. They said she'd become something more than human, a protector born of loss and duty. And somewhere in a quiet office in Langley, a sealed file sat at the bottom of a drawer. The label read, Project Revenant, Active Asset. The clearance level was eyes only. Inside the folder were photos, grainy, long-range surveillance images. One showed a woman in camouflage, kneeling beside a sniper rifle. The next was of an empty hillside, her silhouette gone. On the back of one photo, someone had written in red ink, Confirmed engagement. Target neutralized. Whisper operational. A year after the mission, Harris visited Arlington National Cemetery. He stood before a simple stone marker engraved, Lieutenant Sarah Miles, United States Navy born, March 8, 1988, date of death. Classified. The grass around the grave swayed gently in the breeze. He placed the scorched dog tag they'd found beside the stone and knelt, his voice low. You didn't deserve to be forgotten, he whispered. But I think that's what you wanted. A quiet laugh escaped him. You were never meant to live in the spotlight, were you? You were meant to disappear. He stood, turning to leave. But as he did, he noticed something small resting on the edge of the grave, a single bullet casing, polished clean. His heart froze. The initials were there again. WM. He looked around, no one in sight. The trees were still, the air calm. But somewhere far off, he swore he heard it again. A distant, faint crack, the unmistakable sound of a sniper's rifle echoing across the horizon. He smiled, shaking his head. Goodbye, Whisper. Then he walked away, leaving the casing glinting in the sun. In another part of the world, atop a quiet hill overlooking a war-torn village, a lone figure watched through a scope. The wind tugged at the edge of her hood as she adjusted her rifle, eyes narrowing. Through the crosshairs, she saw a group of soldiers pinned down by enemy fire, outnumbered, desperate. She inhaled. She exhaled. And the rifle whispered once more. The battle below shifted instantly. The soldiers broke free, unaware of the unseen hand that had just saved them. The sniper stood, slinging her rifle over her shoulder. The tall grass swayed around her, golden under the setting sun. Sarah Miles' Whisper walked away without a sound. No medals, no applause. Only the satisfaction of a promise kept. Because for her, the war never truly ended. It simply changed shape. And in every battlefield where heroes fell and hope flickered, there would always be the faint echo of a distant shot clean. Perfect, unmistakable, reminding those who lived that someone, somewhere, was still watching. The legend of Whisper lived on. And she was still out there. Always ready. Always unseen. Always protecting.